How's it going, YouTube? Coming to today with another video, and today, guys, what the video is going to be the complete guide to Tearlament. There's so much to talk about today, and I'm very excited to do so because this deck is so fantastic, and there's definitely a lot to cover. So if you haven't already checked out my sponsors over on Gem, Cloud, Dragonshield, Imperium, ChainLink, or Grimoire, definitely go ahead and do so all down below in the description. And while you're there, check out ChainLink for my Where to Hand Trap Field Center, code GGYGO, and all my playmats in Imperium Duelist with code GGYGO10. I appreciate each and every one of you so much that I'm giving away a Edison core for Lightsworn. The main game is already so expensive to play, so I really want to give someone the opportunity to play an ult format, which is really fun because Edison is a great time. So if you want a chance to enter, definitely comment down below your favorite deck in the game. And without further ado, let's hop right on into the video. The first thing I want to talk about is going to be the main deck monsters. So the cards that allow you to play on your opponent's turn is going to be Hobness and Tear Cache. These cards are pretty crazy. I really love the interaction that you can go ahead and Tear Cache, banish something from your hand while your opponent's playing, summon this card mill 3, and then if you have Super Poly and your opponent has a Dweller, you can go ahead and just Super Poly and draw with your Tear Cache and their Dweller. So it definitely comes up quite often. It's very strong. The other thing too is, like, if you know that your opponent's going to put up like a Noir or like a crazy board or something that you just can't out, then you have to use Hobness early or Tear Cache early to make sure that you can at least put up like a Mud or a Garura, something that's going to help you a little bit play through the board, because at the very least you can put up like an SP with a banish, right? So still very important. The Hobness and the Tear Cache, both mill 3s, both very important for the deck. And then also when Tear Cache is sent to the grave by card effect, you can mill 2. Shiren almost always just gets ashed, but it's still very strong. If you're under Shifter, then you can send one out of your hand banished, and then summon Shiren, but you won't mill 3 because it has to send a card from your hand to the graveyard. Since that action never happened, you will just summon. That's what's really good about making Baguska, because if you have another 4 in your hand, you can just normal summon, make a Baguska real quick, and pass. Also, Merle is really strong as a starter right now because it's almost better than Rhino off no cards because of the fact that it is a mill 3. Rhino off the bat is just going to be normal summon, send Tear Cache to go ahead and mill 2, which can be really strong because at any point in time your deck can just mill crazy. But at the same time, sometimes you really want to make sure that you hold the effect of Rhino for later on when you mill it or send it with the card effect, because at that point you can actually send a name to fuse with monsters that are live in the grave. Talking about the spells and traps, it's really important to know that, like, especially Crime is just the one of in your sideboard that you're setting and going first that is so strong, and it actually has multi-application. Like, if I'm playing against a matchup that has a lot of Bishals, or I'm expecting Bishals, then even going second, I'm keeping Crime in because of the fact that you can recur one of your banished tier monsters when this is sent to the grave by card effect. So if I'm playing against like Dragonlink, I'm definitely keeping this in. So if my Merle, for example, gets banished, I can just mill Crime and then add back Merle and still play, right? So it's really strong. Same with Meta Noise. Not really popular right now because Book of Moon's kind of bad at the moment. But when this card gets milled, you can add back a Tearlament monster from your graveyard to your hand. Very strong for adding back things like Hobness or Tear Cache. Mostly Tear Cache, but still very strong. Soliac on send is a Rhoda, but it's also a permanent imperm. You don't have to send a Tearlament monster. A lot of people get confused on that. You don't actually have to send one of your tier monsters. You can send whatever you want for this card, which also makes it very phenomenal. It helps you dodge a lot of things. So if you get like targeted, you can Soliac target something else, and then you can go ahead and send the monster being targeted. So a lot of very cool interactions card can provide. Also, Heartbeat, being able to send anything out of your hand to the graveyard and then spin a back row back to the deck. And then if this is sent to the grave, you can add back a Tearlament trap. So this is another way to get back to your Crime. Same with Scream. If it's milled, you can add a trap from your deck to your hand that's Tearlament. So it's another way to get to Crime. Or if you banish Trivia, you can add Crime. So a lot of ways to get to this card. Scream has a lot of ruling issues with it, but at the same time, if this card leaves the field after the effect is applied to mill 3 and then your opponent's monsters lose 500, even if Scream is off the field for the rest of the turn, anything on your opponent's board will be minus 500 attack. So very important to keep in mind. This card's very strong. It allows you to play on your opponent's turn more, because if you have a Tear Cache and a Scream live, you get to mill 6, which is also very, very strong. So something to keep in mind. One thing too that I tell a lot of people is that I usually never end my board with a tier monster unless I have Crime, because of the fact that you have the ability to go like SP Baron Toad with Crime, and then when you Toad, you add back Tear Cache, and then you can summon Tear Cache for another mill 3 or with Scream of 6, and then you have the crime live. So there's a lot of ways you can play around that board, but I almost always keep all of my tier names in deck just so I know when I go to mill that I'm not just going to be Bishilled before I can mill. If you have like a Rhino you can leave in grave, I almost always do that. If I don't have a Rhino in rotation, I have a free search, I'm just always going to add a Rhino and keep it in my hand, because at that point I know that Kaleido is always live. That's another thing that's really important, is making sure that card's always live. Even if you just play 2 Rhino, there's a lot of ways to make sure that your resource game is solid. So talking more so about Post Mama, these cards have been absolutely insane. They're the Shizu cards. Not really a whole lot to say about them. They're probably going to be banned soon, unfortunately, because I love these cards, but they are pretty broken, so they probably deserve it. I'm always sending a Guido first. I'm never sending Kelbeck first off of Beatrice, because I'd rather hard draw a Kelbeck than a Guido, because at least Kelbeck is a really crazy hand trap, whereas a Guido doesn't really do a whole lot. It does have the reborn effect, but it almost never comes up. Diviner is really strong. Even if it gets impermed, I've actually done the really funny play of just using a Dragos Tapeli and a Diviner to make a Baron, so that's pretty fun. But overall, usually you're going to use your Diviner to send one of these, but also you can bring back your Diviner off a Cross Sheep, so also another very relevant play that you can do. Talking more so about the bricks of the deck, Hellstraw Hollow is probably the one that got cut from most lists. It's just not very good. It's like a pseudo Guido, but at the same time, you can't like normal summon it to make like an SP or something with your other monster, and a really bad brick to draw. You really need to see this in like Shiren. Granted, you also need to see that with like Beast, Shyam, or Mali, but at the same time, I'd way rather pitch one of them than a Hollow, because at that point, it's just like a mill one versus like a draw one, or like a potential utility engraved like a Shyam or a Mali. Especially a Shyama, if you drew like a Solic when you're going first, be able to pop that and go off is really crazy. So Hellstraw Hollow, definitely the worst one of the bunch. Beast still really strong. Being able to detach Gorilla, send Beast, draw 2 into like your side cards is really strong. If you're on Window, then you can do that too, but I don't play Window. Shyama being able to pop a Kaleido Heart because it's a fiend, and then use the Kaleido Heart effect, or you can pop it face down. It's also a 6 to go into Beatrice. Same with Melee, just a 6 to go into Beatrice. I don't play Denier or Dangerous. I think both of those cards are just awful, to be honest. They just don't really serve a huge purpose in the deck when you could just like mill a Melee and then just use Melee effect. I don't really think that the deck has enough spots for playing cards like that. So just kind of keep that in consideration moving forward, that you don't need them. The other thing too is Nightsword Serpent. This card is always in my list. It's so good. Shout out to Cody Angeloff, because I'm pretty sure he's one of the first people to start playing this card. He always ranted and raved about it to me, so now I just love this card, because every time that I play it, it's just fantastic. This card is really strong when it's sent to the grave by card effect. You can go ahead and summon it back to the board and then make your Bahamut Toad play. So also really strong. It's also really there for chain block in the graveyard. So like, let's say that you just like send in a Guido and this with the mill 5 and like the Kelbeck, or like you hit a tier cash mill 3 and you mill this in like a Kelbeck. It's really strong because then your opponent can't ash the Kelbeck, right? So it's just another one of those things where chain blocking can be very cool. The Horus cards. Now these cards are really strong. I don't really feel like the home for these cards is in Tearlament. These cards are really strong in other decks because they also mitigate a lot of problems other decks have. I feel like they just create a whole new choke point for Tier that Tier never had. You could like Imperm or Veiler on a Bahamut, I guess, but at the same time, being able to Imperm or Veiler on a zombie vampire just feels like GG most times, because you have to waste so many cards to get to that point. So I really don't like these cards in Tier overall, but they are very strong, and I've seen a lot of people have success with them because of the grind game follow-up and what you can do. But at the same time, again, I'm not sold on these cards in Tearlament. They're not very strong in the deck, but everything else I've seen them in, they've been fantastic. So with King of the Swamp, this is a card that everyone's cut by now. This card's just not very good. It's a horrible mill, and also if you're going to play this, you might as well just play Beast King of the Swamp, because you're never adding poly off this card, because it's another bad mill and a bad draw. So King of the Swamp, you could just play like one Beast King of the Swamp to play Recallus, but the extra deck's already very tight, and Recallus isn't like the craziest card right now, so definitely not one that we're trying to play, especially without Kit in the game right now, because then you have to play an additional brick that we don't really want to play. So I would highly recommend that you don't use King of the Swamp or Beast King of the Swamp moving forward, because they're just not that good of an investment at the moment, and plus you have to see them on the mills, or else they're just like dead draws or just dead on a mill, so not really that great to see. A very interesting option for the deck is going to be playing Starfrost and Astrolaud. I really like this because on mill of the Starfrost, you can summon an Astrolaud to help push for lethal. You also can use the Astrolaud and something else to make an SP for the full effect, which is very cool. This card can also send off your Cross Sheep to go ahead and bring back things like Diviner or Rhino, so definitely very good utility in the deck, and can come out of absolutely nowhere and be very effective into the game state. This card is really cool too because it doesn't have to just pop your opponent's cards. It can also pop your own cards. So if you ever need to get like a Shiren off the board fused, you can do that as well. Now, playing around Droll is really important. So if you have Foolish Burial Goods and you think you're going to get Drolled, definitely does Foolish Burial send Solic, not Trivikarma, because if you go Trivikarma, add Planet, and your opponent Drolls, well, you're not really doing a whole lot. But if you go dump the Solic and then add yourself like a Shiren, especially if you already have a tier cache, then you definitely want to send the Solic instead because it's a guaranteed thing that you can go ahead and banish with your tier cache to keep milling, at least to play on your opponent's turn or your own turn, depending on how your turn goes. So playing around Droll is something that you always have to keep in mind. Now let me show you a game state that came up that I've gotten a lot of questions about. So when I'm teaching someone tier and I'm really talking about technical play, this is something that really comes up. So this was an actual game state that I had at a tournament, so I want to make sure that everyone knows how to play through something like this. Now obviously my graveyard was a lot larger than this with like spells and traps because of all the mills, but at the same time, this is just going to be the simplified variant of this. So your grave is Mally, tier cache, and then your field is Mud Dragon and Sword Serpent with a Nessie in hand. Pause the video real fast and try to figure out how I played through this board. Now, if you're back, something that you can do is go ahead and use the Serpent and the Mud Dragon to make Bahamut and summon Toad. Now, from here, you can go ahead and summon out the Sprint, go Chainlink 2 Toad to add back tier cache, and dump Merly. Now, the Merly is going to fuse with the Nessie in your hand to make the Garura, which is really strong because now you can go Mally, summon Mally, overlay, make Beatrice, detach one, dump the Agido. Again, we're dumping the Agido first here. So it's Agido first and Garura 2. So you're going to be able to get another draw here, a mill 5. If you mill anything tier related, you get the mill 3 as well. So definitely very cool and a really optimal line to get yourself through a very awkward situation. Now, just talking about a blank hand here, just anything this could have been, it's just a random hand from DB. Going to go ahead and start off with Shiren to go and pitch the Destrudo here to mill 3. Going to mill that Rhino Heart here. So you kind of have to decide how you want to go about this now because of the fact that the tier cache here with the Destrudo can just end up being a Baron here, which can actually go a lot further for you. So even with the Rhino Heart being engraved, I'm unfortunately going to have to go ahead and just banish it with tier cache. So you'll see why here too. I'm going to go ahead and mill my 3. So we'll see if we get anything good here. We did mill the Mally, which can come up later. So we're going to use this Destrudo here to target our Shiren, pay the 4,000 as well. And then we will go ahead and send both of these off for the Baron. And then we can go and set the Trivy now. Baron to pop the Trivy here. And so now we can go ahead and grab our planet off of the Trivikarma, which is going to be very relevant because now we know that we have the Mally engraved as well. So we're going to grab our other Rhino Heart. I'm just going to normal summon it. And then we'll go the Rhino to dump the Havnus here. Then the Havnus will go ahead and use the Nessie to make the Garura. And then we'll use the Mally to summon Mally. And then from there, we'll make the Beatrice. And you kind of have to decide what you want to do here. You can go a little bit harder and send like a mill 5, but we don't really need to right now. We just need to make sure that we have a solid board. And I'm just trying to put up multiple negates right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and detach and send my Sword Serpent. So I'm just going to make that Chainlink 2 and just draw a card after this. Which is really strong to be able to do. That's why I love playing this card, because it just gives you options. And now we have Super Poly plus Nessie, so you already know that's pretty strong. So now we can go into our Bahamut. The Bahamut can detach the Rhino. You want to make sure you are detaching the Rhino there because the other one's banished. And summon out the Toad here. So you kind of have a couple different things that you can do right now because tier cache is engraved, so you're going to add that back off of this as well. You can kind of hope that you like mill something and shuffle back to pop this. Or you can just do what I'm about to do and just link them both off for an SP, which is fine. Because now your end board is going to be SP, Toad, Beatrice, Baron, plus Super Poly. And then when we send down a name to fuse, or if we send down like a mill 5, it's probably just going to be a name because we already have Kaleido lined up, which is amazing here. Now we have the Planet Pop. You have Super Poly to add the Mothman after we pitch the Nessie. It's a pretty nasty board to play against. So let's talk about the deck list. So a couple things to note here is going to be the main deck hand traps. So Droll and Imperm is kind of random to play the Imperm, but there's no better 40th card in my opinion in this list. So playing the Droll is also very important because sometimes your hands are really awkward or like your mills are awkward and you just need a chance to get to the next turn to be able to mill more. And that's where you really have to be able to play the hand traps to just shut your opponent off completely. If you're playing against Pearly or Monodome and you have the Drolls or even Fluanderies, very solid card to draw. The one of Imperm just comes up, and then you can side into more Imperms because, you know, things like Dweller, a lot of people don't play around the Imperm anymore as well, which is very good for us. But at the same time, playing the Droplet also is pretty strong too if you want to play those. I'm just playing the Imperm because it's just better interaction for us. Overall, though, playing the 2 Nessie, the 1 Mothman, I think playing 2 is fine because they're really bad going first. Going second, they're a lot better because they help unbrick your hand when you're playing so many bricks. Now, the siding pattern is going to be a little weird. If you're playing against a mirror match, you want to leave in your Shyama, your Destrudo, your Trivikarma, because these are the cards that are going to force your opponent to use a Shuffler on you without you doing literally anything while you're under like a Dweller and they're like dead milling you. But at the same time, when it comes back to your turn, you have a lot of ignition effects in your graveyard. So it's going to bait out something, which is the whole point of playing these cards in the mirror match. So the other thing, though, is if you're playing against another matchup that you need non-engine for, I'm pulling out Trivy, I'm pulling out Shyama, Beast, Sword Serpent, Destrudo. Like, those cards are just out of my deck list because I want to make sure that my hands that I'm drawing are optimal. Especially if the Heartbeat isn't something that you think is going to be that good in the matchup, that's also coming out for non-engine. Because the max I usually side is 6, and those 6 are just coming straight out of my list to play other cards like Imperms, Lancias, Lightning Storms, Duster, whatever you find the most important, right? I've been seeing Shyama get removed from a lot of lists, but I still think that it's really important to play. It's a really good card overall and helps you force out a lot of really awkward situations. The other thing, though, is I'm playing 2 Kaleido Heart. I explained this in my deck profile, but it's really important to run 2 Kaleido Heart because your opponent's going to try to force that card into being banished into the graveyard and just try to get away from you as fast as possible so that you don't have that resource. But when you have the other one, it's really crazy because it's the only card that makes your Scream live, your Solic live. It's the only card that really lets you play as far as like summoning something from the extra deck and having like immediate pressure on the board, right? That's something that's really important to be able to have that resource game. I do hope this video did help you because there's so much to talk about tier and there's even more than just this, but I definitely want to make sure that it was clear, concise, and enough to where you can get a better idea of how to play the deck and some of the thought process behind some of the lines of play. If you haven't already checked out my Discord, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, or my Metafy page, definitely go ahead and check them all out down below in the description. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel while we're on our way to 30,000 subscribers. I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you all so much.